There are moments in war when the enemy doesn't defeat you by strength, but by pride. Moments when victory depends not on who fires first, but on who thinks last. It was the winter of 1944, deep in the Ardennes. Snow fell heavy over Belgium's forests, muffling the sound of distant artillery. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. Hitler's desperate gamble to break the Allied line and turn the war. The U.S. Army's 99th Infantry Division, new and untested, was holding a frozen sector the veterans called the Graveyard Line. Among them was Lieutenant Michael Warren, a strategist by training, not by rank. He'd studied enemy patterns, terrain, and radio intercepts long after others slept. His predictions were unnervingly precise. Yet his commanding officer, Colonel Everett Monroe, dismissed him at every turn. Monroe was a man of medals and speeches, a hero of earlier battles, convinced the Germans were finished.
When Warren warned of unusual German radio silence, Monroe laughed. Silence? That's because they're retreating, son. Don't read ghosts into static. But Warren saw something else, the stillness before the storm.
2 nights later, reconnaissance scouts failed to return. Artillery went quiet. The forest was eerily still. Then, under that silence, faint, almost imagined, came the mechanical growl of tanks. The enemy was moving, not retreating, surrounding. And in that moment, one man's arrogance was about to push an entire regiment into the jaws of a trap. The attack came at dawn. Snow exploded as German panzer shells tore through the line. Communications cut out instantly. Monroe screamed into a dead radio, demanding orders that would never come.
Warren, meanwhile, acted. Without permission, he ordered a false retreat, a deliberate pullback into the valley's eastern ridge, where he'd secretly positioned artillery the night before. Monroe shouted after him, "You'll get us all court-martialed!" But Warren didn't answer. He simply raised his flare gun and fired.
Red smoke arced into the white sky. Seconds later, thunder. The ridge erupted. Artillery fire rained down on the advancing tanks from above. The German spearhead, thinking they'd broken the line, rolled straight into a kill zone. The roar faded. The valley fell silent, except for the echo of men realizing they had been saved by disobedience. And Colonel Morone stood frozen.
When the smoke cleared, the battlefield looked like a graveyard of iron. Blackened snow, shattered helmets, frozen stillness. Colonel Monroe stumbled through the wreckage, his uniform torn, his face pale with disbelief. He found Warren directing medics, calm as the snow around him. Monroe's voice trembled, part fury, part confusion. "You defied a direct order," he said. Warren didn't look up. "Sir, the order would have led us straight into the trap."
The colonel's jaw tightened. "You're out of line." "No, sir," Warren replied quietly. "The line held because I stepped out of it." Those words hung in the air like smoke, insolent yet true. When headquarters arrived hours later, they were prepared to recover bodies, not survivors. Instead, they found a functioning division, shaken but intact. Reports came in confirming that Warren's maneuver had destroyed an entire German advance column. The colonel tried to explain it away, claiming he'd approved the move. But the radio logs and the men told a different story. The commanding general called both officers to his tent. He listened in silence as they spoke. Then he said, simply, "Colonel Monroe, you failed to see the trap. Lieutenant Warren saw it and broke it." He turned to Warren. "Your defiance saved this army's flank. The rule book didn't. Remember that." Outside, the men whispered as Monroe passed. Pride had melted into shame. That night, under a sky of falling snow, Warren sat alone, writing in his notebook. One line stood out, a quiet truth written in ink and blood. The enemy's trap is never on the map. It's in the mind that refuses to listen. Months later, as the Allies rolled into Germany, stories of the lieutenant who disobeyed to save his men spread through the ranks. His name, though rarely printed in reports, became a quiet lesson in officer schools and strategy briefings. Colonel Monroe resigned after the war, his pride too heavy to bear. Warren stayed, training younger officers, emphasizing judgment over obedience. He never spoke of that battle again, but every cadet who studied under him heard the same phrase etched into their discipline like scripture. Question arrogance, not authority. Authority listens, arrogance commands. Decades later, historians called the 99th stand at the Ardennes the turning point, the moment when the U.S. Army learned to trust reason over rank. No monument bore Warren's name, no medals glittered on his chest, but in the minds of those who lived, his defiance became doctrine, his silence a kind of leadership. Because history remembers the victories that broke empires, but legends remember the decisions that saved men. And the true turning point of that battle wasn't written in orders, it was carved in courage. The enemy's trap is pride. Once you escape that, no army can corner you again.